house needs painting, grass needs mowing, where's he at?
Hi, this is Hank. Sorry I missed your call. Leave me your name and your number and I'll get back to you.
He's gone fishing.
Welcome to Off the Water with Hank Parker. I'm your co-host, Sarah Beth, and you are?
Hello, Sarah Beth. I'm Hank Parker, and welcome to Off the Water. Hey, I have got some good news for us. We got a very special, one of the best guys, one of my best friends, one of the greatest guys I know, and he is called the Bass Chaplain, Mr. Chris Wells. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
Man, how y'all doing? It is such an honor to be here. Wow. I was jittery all day. So,
man, I tell you,
it's
exciting to have you. I'm glad you've taken the time to do this podcast with us, and we're all pumped up, man.
Man, I was too. When you called this morning, I dropped my spatula into eggs. I couldn't even answer the phone. I was so nervous. So, hopefully I can make it through it.
I guarantee you, we're going to make it. It's all going to be good. Let me ask you, first of all, what is the Bass Chaplain? Tell us about that.
Man, that is a great question. It's really funny because, my life story, I grew up loving the sport of bass fishing. All my heroes were bass pros. And, I watched your show since the time I was a kid. And I grew up just loving the sport of bass fishing and never really understood why. In 2008, the Bassmasters Classic came to Lake Hartwell for the first time. And I volunteered to be an observer. I actually offered to pay ESPN if they would let me ride in the boat and watch somebody fish. You're sick when you want to pay to watch somebody fish. But I got paired with the guy who won the tournament, Alton Jones, and he looked at me and said, "Chris, we're thinking about getting a chaplain for the Bassmaster Tour." He said, "We're looking at a lot of speakers. Your name keeps coming up. Would you be interested in being the chaplain?" And Hank, I bowed my head and tried to look very spiritual. And I said, "Let me pray about that for 2 seconds. Yes, I would love to be the chaplain for the Bassmaster Tour." And that's kind of how the moniker stuck. And I've been the chaplain for Major League Fishing and Fishers of Men, a couple of other organizations. But it's been a lifelong love and a passion in my life, and I'm very blessed to be able to do it. So,
well, they're very blessed to have you. I can tell you that. Do you know the history of? We called it Focus to begin with.
Right. Absolutely. Terry Chupp is one of my mentors. I love Terry Chupp. And that guy is he's an amazing evangelist, amazing organization. And I would actually go to the Focus meetings when they would come close to me and, always calling Terry and harassing Terry. Hey, I want to be a part. And so he's been a good friend for a lot of years.
You know how that all started?
Now, tell me how the whole thing got going.
Jimmy Houston. I get credit for it, but I had very little to do with it. Jimmy Houston called me and he said, "Hey, Hank, we need to start having some kind of services. We're on the road. We're never in church. We need to spend some time together and all the guys that are Christians, and we need to evangelize as well to offer some of these guys that are hurting and have questions. We need to have some kind of organized service. And would you help me put that together?" And I said, "Hey, I'm all in." But it was Jimmy's idea, and that's where Focus was birthed. We started on Wednesday nights at the BASS events, having a meeting, and then Terry came along, and he just made that thing really work because, like you say, he's quite the evangelist. And he worked hard inviting. First it was just Jimmy and I telling people, "Hey, y'all to come. We're going to have a get-together tonight. We're going to open the Bible. And we're going to have a little Bible study. And we're going to have some great fellowship. Love to have you join us." But then when Terry got involved, Terry's on fire, and he talks to all these people that have different questions and said, "Well, come to the meeting. So, man, it started getting really big. We went from just a handful to having 30 or 40 people, which was really exciting.
That was the heyday of Focus. You guys had a pre-tournament meeting. And when I first started, we had a pre-tournament meeting and we had really good attendance, but they've waylaid me in cutting out the meeting now. And so we have to kind of piece it together. And so sometimes on the day off, or if they have, when they're back, maybe the last day of practice, we'll do like a Bible study at lunchtime where I have to feed them and get them to come into the service crews. So we try to pull in the service crews and try to pull in all those guys. But But man, it was such a great meeting back then. I remember going to a couple of those, with Terry, and it was outstanding.
You get on the road and you have questions, you have things that come up, some things, troubles back at home, or are you just not sure? The road's a lonely place to be. A lot of people don't realize that you can be with friends, but when you're away from home and you're out of your environment, it's a lonely place to be. And so many of these fishermen have issues, and they don't have anybody that they have confidence in to talk about personal things, to pray with them, questions about the Bible. And here you are. I mean, what a great service is that, and how awesome it is to be able to have someone you can confide in, somebody that'll pray with you, and somebody will give you some guidance, strong spiritual guidance straight out of the book. And that's to have that guy is impressive, and to have you in that role is really a blessing.
Well, it's a blessing to me, and I appreciate, the opportunity that God's given me, and we all do what we're gifted to do. And they have about every problem that a church would have. You're exactly right. It's everything that you can possibly imagine. I think my first Bassmaster Elite Series tournament that I was the chaplain, we had a young angler, had his dad pass away right in the middle of his first tournament ever. And so, there are a lot of different issues that they face, and certainly being on the road is a brutal job. A lot of guys, they will say, I want to be a professional fisherman. I want to do that. But it entails a lot more than just fishing. It surely does. And a lot of people don't understand that. So it is.
Yeah, a lot of people jump in there thinking they're living the dream. It turns out to be a bad dream, a nightmare.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
You need somebody there to give you a little calming effect, to calm everything down. Well, let me ask you about.
It really does.
Let me ask you about all the controversy that's going on surrounding forward facing sonar.
No.
Are you a referee? Do you get involved? At what level and what point are you involved in all that?
Man, I have been the priest. I've been the high priest trying to listen to both ends of that argument. And I'm telling you, I'm catching it from both ends. I really am. A lot of the bass staff will come to me and, say, they'll have one perspective on it and the anglers will come the other. I think this year before the Bassmaster Classic, I think I had 17 pros call me and just say, man, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I don't, I hate this thing. I used to want to wake up in the morning and go fishing every day. Now I don't even want to go. And then you got, some of the young guys going, man, I'm really good at this. And it's really a fine line that you have to walk to be able to minister to both sides of that issue. It is a polarizing issue, and there's a lot of drama in the sport of bass fishing right now.
It is so hard to find common ground. I have taken the road of I'm not for it or I'm not against it. I want to make sure that all these high school fishermen that we're working with and trying to get them funding to be able to maintain a presence at school where their lack of funds, we're doing a fundraising opportunity for them. And I'm really wanting to get these guys grounded fundamentally. I don't want them not to understand the basic principles of what I learned as a fisherman, but nor do I want to shortchange them and penalize them from not being able to take part in the new technology, because it is a big benefit. So you've got both sides. And so I've tried to stay neutral as I can, and I still get bashed from both sides.
I know it, and that's what happens when you stay kind of in the middle. You do catch it from both ends. But I agree with you. It's important, I think, for young anglers to learn the basics, to learn, the way that we learned, that you had to go out and you had to do it, and you had to practice and you had to get out there. But at the same time, you don't want to hold it back, and you don't want to be that person that is very, very adamant against moving forward in the sport. And there's going to have to be a balance that is found. And, I think that's good with everything in your life. It's good to be balanced in your life. It's good to be balanced in your theology. It's good to be balanced in every area of your life. And I think that somehow with the sport of bass fishing, we're going to have to find that balance between, using and not using. Now, I'll tell you, I've got forward facing sonar on my boat, and this is what it's done for me. It has enabled me to see the fish that I cannot catch now. And so that's the way it's doing. So that's it.
That's fair.
I'm a member of that fraternity. I can tell you that. I've spent so much time trying to learn, and I stink at it. And I end up spending my 3/4 of my day trying to figure out how to catch what I see. And at the end of the day, I'm no further along. So I finally, after about 5 or 6 hours, I'll abandon it and just start doing what I know how to do. But I've really enjoyed the challenge personally. It is something completely different, and it's extremely challenging to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And sorry, I manage
go
social
right ahead.
media. So I see all the nasty comments, I see all the positive comments, and one of the top things that I've seen is all about forward-facing sonar, saying, I can't believe Hank is for this, or I can't believe Hank's against it. People try to say, at what point does innovation need to stop? And the truth of that is that innovation will never stop. It's either you're going to have to adapt. I think there needs to be a meeting of what should be allowed and not allowed in tournament fishing, but recreational forward-facing sonar use should not be discounted, or people should be judged for using it,
That's exactly right. Hank, you hit on it a while ago when you said, the older guys that I talk to have a lot different opinion than young guys. What I hear the most is, an older guy will get out there and he'll start fishing and he'll try it, but he has so much history in his head and so much knowledge of, he sees a willow tree up there and goes, man, I know I can catch him up there. And I'm out here trying to figure out what this is I'm throwing at right here. And you can't turn your brain off and you can't commit to it fully. And that seems to be the hardest thing that a lot of our anglers that are older that are dealing with, is just turn your brain off and saying, I got to go either full into the forward facing sonar, or either I got to do my thing. And it's when you kind of start mixing them up is when you get in trouble.
Well, I had an older angler back all 40 years ago when the buzzbait came out, and it was the hottest thing going, but it was kind of a top water type early morning, late afternoon thing for most people. And I had a friend of mine that won like 9 big fish awards in 4 years, and he married that buzzbait. That's all he did. He threw a buzzbait. It didn't matter if the water temperature was 49 or 79 or 99. He threw a buzzbait all day long. And he married that thing. And he was the best buzzbait fisherman that I think ever lived, but that's all he did. And that's kind of the way forward-facing sonar is for the guys that are really, really, really good. They're committed. And the older guys that have so much versatility and so much knowledge about every method and every technique that they've refined over the last 30 years, they're not committed because they've got too many things on their mind and too many opportunities and too many options. And some of these younger kids, they jump in at full steam, and they're not cluttered with a lot of knowledge of other methods or other techniques. And so they're not tempted, as I am, or as you are, or as an older fisherman that has been out there for many years, they're not tempted to go beat the bank, or they're not tempted to use another technique because they've committed to this thing. And it's a good thing to commit to, because look at the string of fish it's producing. So you can't argue with all that, but it's really difficult.
That's 100% true. This year, one of the things I've heard that I've kind of discredited, in my experience is, during the tournament, if a marshal doesn't show up, a lot of times they'll let me ride in the boat. And that helps me, I get to be a marshal. It helps me build a relationship with the angler. And one of the, some of the younger guys I've gotten the opportunity to ride with, I got to ride with John Garrett this year. And I will tell you this, he is every bit as good with a flipping stick as he is with the forward-facing sonar. I learned that really quickly. He kind of abandoned the forward-facing sonar and went flipping, and boy, that kid can fish. And so, they're definitely, they can do both. And so, when you hear some older guys say these guys don't know what they're doing, can't, a lot of them can do both. They can still, do both. But it's definitely an issue where, it's so complex and there's so many facets, and you listen to so many different people, and you can argue both sides of it. And I can make a good argument for why you should use it, and I can make a good argument for why you can't use it. So we're going to have to find a balance there somewhere.
Well, almost every time I listen to somebody that's pro forward facing sonar, they make some very, very valid points. And then when I listen to a guy that is anti forward facing sonar, he makes some very valid points. So they've both got great points. And so, but it's so divided that you don't find many people where I am. I don't really, I'm not for it and I'm not against it. I'm just kind of in the middle. I think we need to figure out what is the best thing for the sport. And then we need a chaplain to get everybody to quit hating each other that have a different point of view.
Man, I need you to pray for me this year. That's all I'm saying. I need you to pray. I need your prayers, because it's a tough, position to be in. And but we're definitely this year, I'm praying for peace, and I'm praying for, something that'll bring us together. And so just like this country, I believe, is going to finally come together. I hope we can get the sport of bass fishing come together. I mean, you remember back when the Bush beer controversy happened. That's probably the only other controversy I can think of in my lifetime that really polarized a lot of guys. And it's not near as polarizing as this issue has been. But you remember, Bush came in and this was after you had retired, but Bush said that you're going to have to wear a patch if you're going to do that. And some of the guys said, I'm not wearing a beer patch. And, they took off and went to FLW. And some of them said, well, if everybody leaves, how, who's going to minister here? And so, and finally, I think they finally kind of came together. And I'm praying that that's going to happen too, that everybody's going to see that the sport is bigger than, one opinion or the other. And maybe we can, find some common ground and try to work this thing out civilly. I'm praying for that. I really am. Or if not, we're going to have a big brouhaha, and you go see the Bass Chaplain in the middle of trying to break up fights on the docks. That'll be
absolutely.
That's you say that jokingly, but that's about how extreme some of this has gotten. People are so angry on both positions, and so it's funny how divided it has gotten, and it's not necessary. I respect the person that is for forward-facing sonar. I also respect the person that is against forward-facing sonar. And somehow we've got to keep the issue and not personalities and not people, and not turn against them. You can be against, I got a lot of friends that they vote Democrat. I don't get it, but nevertheless, they're still my friends, and I'm not holding that against them. And of course, they feel the same thing about me. How is that guy going to vote Republican? And so we got to give and take, and you got to have some common ground, and you got to respect, I think, is the main word, is to have respect for one another and figure out what is the best thing for the sport. And that's the question at hand, in my opinion. What is the best thing for our sport?
Right. I think you hit the issue dead, nail on the head. Even with our country, we've politicized so much where if you vote against me, you're my enemy. Well, that shouldn't be the case. There was a time in our country where even Ronald Reagan, Tip O'Neill would get together and they would fight on the House floor, but then they'd go back and they would be buddies, afterwards. Mm-hmm. And that all comes from the respect issue. And if anybody brought any of us to get, Jesus brought everybody together. He brought people together. Ate with tax collectors and sinners. He didn't stay like tax collectors. He didn't, do the things they did. He called them to come away from that, but he did, accept everybody where they were. He didn't let them stay where they were, but he went to them where they were. And I think that's a big lesson for us to learn, even in the fishing world and in our country today, is that we need to come together and love the person. We might not love what they do, but we can certainly love one another and respect one another's opinion about that. Bass fishing needs to learn that really quickly.
Yeah, I think that's great. One thing that it's not only in our sport. I get Sarah Beth really gets upset when people start bashing me. You know,
I do.
I'm the same way. You can bash me, but don't bash my family. You know, don't be bashing her.
Right.
I'm gonna get pretty defensive. But I can take it. It really bothers her because she knows my perspective. She knows where I stand on the issue, and I'm not
Right.
for or against it. I want what's best for the sport. And if you hold that against me, I can't fix that. I mean, that's
Right.
the way it is. So I'll take whatever comes with that territory. But it's really offensive to her. But I think what the big problem is everybody has a cell phone, and everybody that has an opinion can state that opinion. So everybody now has a soapbox. They've got an elevated place that reaches multiple people, and somebody gets upset. Somebody has an opinion that creates controversy. It just swells. It just keeps, this guy will play off of this guy, that will play off of this person, off of this person. And pretty soon you just got a big old muddy lake. And it seems like that's where we're at, not only in fishing, but everything you look at, politics and life in general. I see where kids at school, you know, they're supposed to be best buddies, and they'll have a falling out, and then one starts bashing the other on Facebook.
Yeah.
And you got a big mess. So I think it's a bigger issue overall than just controversy in bass fishing. I think it is a platform that people have to express whatever anger they have at a moment. They don't think it through, and then all of a sudden, once you draw that line, you're stuck with that position. It's hard to back up, and I see that everywhere.
That's a great point. You know, the old adage comes to my mind that says, with great power comes great responsibility. And every platform gives us this great power. We can stand up and say what we want, and different people can, you know, whatever they want to say. And but sometimes, you know, I quoted in my podcast, I quoted a few years back about there's a movie I love called Jurassic Park, and the guy said, you know, your scientists were so busy wondering about whether they could, they didn't stop to think whether they should. And a lot of times, I know in my life, that serves me very well. That a lot of times I can say stuff and I could say stuff, but I really need to stop and think whether I should say something or not. And that's when you get into the responsibility, because when you have a platform, there needs to be a responsibility that, you know, what I say shouldn't, you know, just be a right. You know, should I say it? So.
Amen. Take us to church, Chris. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, that'll
That's
preach.
the
I
biggest
like
problem.
that. Well, I think really.
Well,
go ahead. Let me hear you.
I just, you know, over the years, I'm not the great example of someone who hasn't. And you know, my wife would have told you that it's a, you know, you're Chris is going to put his foot in his mouth all the time if he just keeps talking. But you know, over the years, you have to learn that just because you have the ability to say something, it really shouldn't mean if you should, you know, say it or not. So
I like
absolutely.
that.
Think
You know,
before you speak.
Solomon said there's a way that seemeth right unto man, but the end of it's death. And the Bible says we're no longer our own. Once we accept Jesus Christ as our Savior, we're no longer our own. We're bought with a price. So we represent Him. And so we need to be careful. And when I say we, I'm looking in the mirror right now. You need to be real careful on taking a position that creates controversy when it's not necessary. You need to be thinking about how to minister to a person. And the one thing that I would say to every fisherman alive, we need to cut each other some slack, grace. Look at the grace that our Lord and Savior has shown to me. I mean, I look in that mirror and I don't know how He could love me. I don't know how He could forgive me. But I'm thankful that He did. And His book explains that He will accept. There's no sin greater than His grace. And I think that is awesome. We need to cut each other a little more slack. You know, we need to be a little bit more forgiving to our fishing friends and brothers.
You know, as bass fishermen, a lot of times what you see is a guy will come along and his whole identity will be bass fishing. I want everybody to think I'm a good, bass fisherman. I want everybody in my club, I want everybody in my organization that I fish with, and that becomes our identity. Well, with Jesus gives us a new identity. He says, listen, you're going to die to yourself and be alive unto me. And when you look at it that way, and you look at the sport of bass fishing, there is so much more that we have in common in the sport, that we all love the sport. I mean, there's not a single person that doesn't get excited in the morning when you're sitting there and that motor's humming and you're looking out over there and you think about all the possibilities and all the things that could happen. And it's such a delightful sport. And it's such a wonderful sport that the person from the, you can take a kid or you can take an old man and they still love it every single way. And if we would kind of get that perspective, is that we have so much more in common than we have, differences, and just focus on those things. I think that a lot of this would kind of iron out and even out. And that's kind of my prayer, is that the guys will see this year that we got a lot in common, and we've got a big fishing family. And that's what, the Bassmaster Elite Series and all of professional bass fishing, it is a family. It really is. And people, people don't understand that, but you travel together, and there's so much that we go through as a family, and we need to keep that in perspective.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Bernie Schultz wrote a blog, I guess you could call it, about Jim Bitter's passing. Jim passed away back in November, and Bernie was he was extremely transparent. A little bit shocking to me that he was so incredibly transparent, and I admire that and I appreciate that in Bernie. Bernie's always been a good guy in my eyes, and we've always been very close friends. But he was very transparent, talking about he and Jim used to travel together, and they had a falling out over a fishing hole that Bernie felt like he was entitled to, and Jim felt like he was entitled to, and Bernie felt slighted, and so they had this falling out. And Bernie, at the scenario of this whole fallout, he said, competition brings out the best and the worst. And he had deep regrets that he and Jim weren't able to put things aside and settle all their differences and maintain their friendship on the same level that they had prior to this event. But I think anybody that's fished any period of time can relate to that. Now, they're probably not going to be as honest as Bernie was. But I look back and I have deep regrets on the way I acted. Competition brings out the best and the worst. And boy, it brought out the worst in me on several occasions that I deeply regret. Randy Dearman at the Bassmaster Classic in '84. I really felt like Randy infringed on my territory, and I was pretty vocal to Randy about that. And I didn't think he was there the first day, and there was two guys over there that were not in the tournament that were spectators, and they listened to my little shouting match where I showed myself, that I deeply regret. And after Randy, who I abused, after Randy left, those guys said, "Hey, that guy was here yesterday. We saw him." Well, and I felt like I was about 1 inch tall. And of course, I went back to Randy and apologized to him, and I deeply regret that happened. But our relationship, it took a long time, a long time. It didn't take but 1 minute for me to mess it all up, but it took a long time to overcome my little temper tantrum. And I hate that, and I wish I could fix that. But I think Bernie really summed it up. It brings out the best and the worst. These guys are under a lot of pressure, and it's so important that we cut each other a little slack.
It really is. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit something about Bernie. When I first started being the chaplain, I remember I got to be a marshal in Bernie's boat, and I remember him telling me. He said, Chris, he said, my family goes to church stuff. I don't go as often as I should. I said, well, Bernie, that's okay. I'm praying for you today. Well, it was on Lake Wheeler, on about the third cast, he caught a 5-pounder. And he looked at me and he said, boy, you are playing for me, aren't you? Well, we developed friendship. And I'll tell you this, Bernie has not missed my Bible study since that time. He
How
comes
about
every
that?
single time, and he's always a class act, and he's always very, very, like you said, he's pointed, but he is absolutely honest with you. When you talk with Bernie Schultz, you're getting the truth. And that's rare. And that's rare in life, but it's really rare in bass fishing.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so he's become a good friend. But I remember, I've heard you tell the story before about how you greased up Jim Bitter's, golden
Measure
rule that
stick.
day.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, he was Jim was that was one of my heroes. I remember him fishing on Minnetonka. One time he had a really good tournament at Lake Minnetonka when I went out there, and I really became a Jim Bitter fan as well as I am with everybody. I've really haven't met anybody in the sport of bass fishing that I just absolutely could not stand. There's always somebody you can learn from. Even if they don't like you, there's people you can learn from, and people that you can. And I really wish that we would come around to that again and say, you know what, we can have conversations, and sometimes it's going to get heated. And Hank, I'll tell you, I've had anglers come in, famous anglers that come in and say they're going through the bag line. They look at me and say, "Man, you just need to pray for me, man. I just lost it today. I missed fish and I lost it. And I said every name in the book, and I just direct them to 1 John 1:9 and say you confess your sins. He's faithful and just to forgive you of your sins, and tell them that Jesus didn't come to beat you up. He came to set you free. And
Right.
So we all need to learn that, I believe.
Well, I think that's good that you're there to minister to them and remind them of that. And I think we all need to be reminded of what Bernie said. It brings out the best and the worst.
Yes.
We need to work on that. We need to think about before we react, and before you actually get on that cell phone and start posting things on Facebook. Let's think this thing through. And I think it'd be a good rule to say, okay, I got this on my mind, but I'm going to wait till tomorrow before I post it. I think it'd be a lot different if you think it through. Okay, now here's some of the fallout in this.
Oh, yeah.
I heard Andy Montgomery say one time, he was talking to a group of high school students, and his big phrase is, "Don't hit send." Don't hit send. He said, when you want to type that thing out and you want to post that picture that you think is, the great, or you're mad or you're angry, he said, don't hit send. He said, wait before you do it. He said, because that stuff is on there forever. He said, however when you post it on the web, it's there. And,
Right.
You might delete it, but somebody's got it somewhere. And so don't hit send.
Good advice, Andy.
That is great advice.
Yeah. That's good stuff.
I used to correct people a lot because our sport is so uniquely different than any other sport, and it's not head-to-head competition. We're not actually competing against each other. We're competing against the lake, and so whoever beats the lake that particular day will end up, or that particular event will end up winning the tournament. People say, "Boy, you smoked on Roland Martin, or you smoked on Nixon, or whatever." No, I didn't. I've never beaten Larry. I've never beaten Roland. I've never beaten Dance. I've never beaten any of those guys. I just caught the most fish and won the tournament. But it never was a rivalry. It never was. ESPN did a little, they tried to turn that thing in when they started Loudmouth Bass. They started trying to turn that thing into a controversial deal where Iaconelli didn't like Van Dam or Skeet Reeves or whomever.
They tried to make it wrestling.
Yeah. And they had just lost NASCAR, and so they wanted to make it rivalries like NASCAR, and it was not what our sport was about. And I tell people, I used to go to the tournaments. It's kind of like coming to a family reunion, man. I'm so glad to see Denny, and I'm so glad to see Roland and all the guys. And it wasn't something that you held a grudge because Roland won the last tournament, or Larry Nixon won the last tournament, or Clun won the last tournament, or Denny Breyer, or whomever it was. You didn't hold a grudge against that person for winning the tournament. It was a reunion, man. You're so happy to see everybody. And that's why it's upsetting to me to see the division that is out there. And I don't know if it's much as forward facing sonar or people's attitude. I think
Yeah.
the stakes have been raised. Hotel bills are outrageous today. The price of gasoline, the price of our boats,
Equipment.
yeah, food. Man, you're under a lot of pressure because you're carrying a big tab from one tournament to the next, and to be able to offset that with sponsors and with tournament winnings, it's hard to do. So
It
much
really
pressure.
is. It's astronomical. And there's so many people that have this idea that fishing is one thing, and it's really not. I tell people, there's some people I minister to, and they've got their names on the faces at Bass Pro Shop, and there's some guys literally eating peanut butter sandwiches, sleeping in the back of their trucks, trying to win enough money to get home. You know, I think there was Mark Davis said one time, he said, I always laugh when golfers talk about pressure. He said, pressure is when there's 10 minutes left in the tournament and you got to catch a 5-pounder to win enough money to get home. He said, that's pressure. And that really is, the sport of bass fishing. It is such a high pressure situation that these guys are under. And you see a lot of that, manifest itself. And people don't really see the real side of professional fishing.
I had a friend that we started at the same time, and we traveled together for a long time. We fished national bass, we fished American bass, we fished a lot of different tournament leagues that before we ever got into bass, and we both kind of followed the same trail and same pattern of fishing national bass, American bass, and United bass, and he and I basically came from the same financial background, not a whole lot of money. And I borrowed $10,000 on a 90-day note when I started to pay all my entry fees and have enough money to cover my expenses from one tournament to the next. And it's like Mark said, I had to get a check in order to pay down on that bank note, or I'm done. Well, my buddy, he had a little more money than I did, and he had about 5 or 6 different credit cards. And so about halfway through the second year, he said, I don't know if I'm going to make Kentucky Lake next week. And I said, what's the problem? He said, man, I'm out of money. I've maxed every credit card. I don't have any money. Could you loan me a little money? And people don't know that side of the story. But there's so many of these guys. And so the pressure they're under, and when they look at somebody that's super successful, that's got it going on, there's a little bit of jealousy involved there. And so they create animosity that shouldn't exist, but I get it. I get it, man. It almost doesn't seem fair for the haves and the have-nots. And it's like you say, you represent, or you fish with people and you minister to people that have their names on packages at Bass Pro, and people that are eating peanut butter crackers trying to get their name at Bass Pro. Right. It's a lot of pressure.
It's hard. And really one of the hardest things about what I do is talking with the guys. I always tell the people that travel with me, we're not really here to celebrate with the winners. We're here to console the losers, because that's the tough. Somebody asked me, why do you stay, for the whole tournament? I said, I stay for the whole tournament because on cut day, people find out whether they're going to get paid or not. And they're more interested in talking about where God is in their life and where, what's going on. And, but the reality of that is it is so hard. It is so hard to see a guy that has gotten to that level and gets to the point where they know they're pushing the end, and it takes a miracle. And where is God there? And people always ask me, what do you pray for, Chris? Do you pray that they catch fish? And my prayer is always that God will help them make a good decision, whatever decision it is. If it's cast by this bush or whatever it is, make good decisions, in your life. And but it is difficult. People don't understand that. And you've hit so many things. I wanted to drop back, and I remember, we were talking about the controversy and how they tried to make it kind of like wrestling and stuff. I don't know if you remember, when they were doing the greatest angler debate, and you were in the front and center of the greatest angler of all time debate. You remember that
Oh
deal?
yeah, yep, I remember.
Well, and ESPN was kind of pushing that, wrestling level, and I was, I wasn't a chaplain then. I was just a fan, and I remember old Skeet Reese, and I didn't know Skeet at the time, and Skeet Reese said something disparaging about you, and it was a scripted deal. It was a thing where he wouldn't do it, but I didn't know that. And he said, Hank Parker's just like me. I wanted to fight Skeet Reese so bad. And I remember the first time I saw him, I didn't realize how big Skeet was. I was like, man, I better back off on that one and stuff like this. So I made friends with Skeet pretty quick.
Yeah, he's a big old boy.
Yeah, I didn't mean to digress back into that, but yeah, that was a funny deal in my life when I realized how big Skeet was. I was like, oh, that's tall. So,
I heard that. That was on Loudmouth Bass. I watched that interview, and you get nailed for a lot of things you deserve, but sometimes you get nailed on things you really don't deserve. And Skeet later came back to me and said, "I didn't have a clue who you were. I always just thought you was laid back."
Oh, that's funny. That is funny. That really is. Yeah. Skeet's a good guy, and so I've enjoyed my conversations with him. But I had to back off that boy when I told him. I don't want to mess with Skeet Reese, Bobby Lane, or Terry Scroggins, or any of those big old boys.
We call those guys here in Union, South Carolina, where I live. We call those guys sir.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And you grew up, similar to where I grew up. Santee, you knew all my buddies, old Joe Avens and Randy Horn and Doug Odom and all those guys that used to fish on Santee, way back in the day. And all those guys were just men. They were, Doug Odom would just as well fight you as look at you when you're out on his deal. So it was, you got to be careful.
You mentioned the name there. You mentioned the name Randy Horn. I fished with Randy so many times, and people ask me a lot out of all the people that I fished with in my lifetime, who do I feel like is the greatest fisherman, or who was the most impressive fisherman with a rod and reel? And Randy didn't have the greatest pageantry as far as flipping or pitching or casting, but he had this magical, unbelievable talent of knowing exactly where that bass was and how to make the right presentation. He would wear me out. He was the best fisherman as far as reading water, catching fish, and putting them in the boat. And Randy and I had a huge falling out. It was... I wrote an article in Bassmaster. Bob Cobb interviewed me, and we were talking about the days at Santee Cooper. And Randy had won that open tournament down there, which was really the first national tournament I ever fished, because there were like 13 different states represented in that tournament. And Randy won it. I finished second. Randy won it. I led it, and going in the last day, and Randy came back and won the tournament, and then he won it the next year and the next year. And so they were talking about Randy Horn, and I said, well, I got a long history with Randy Horn. Randy showed me where the fish were, and I showed him how to fish a spinnerbait and how to catch them. Well, that offended Randy. That offended him bad. He said, you didn't show me nothing. Well, truthfully, I did show him about a spinnerbait. He fished a bait called a Deadly Dudley and was...
I have one in my garage.
Hey, he was lights out with that thing, but I did show him how to fish a spinnerbait. So Randy got where he wouldn't even talk to me. I tried to call him and smooth it over. And so he was at Billups Landing on Santee Cooper, and he had a catfish guiding service. And I know this was hard for him to do, but he called me out of the blue, and he said, he called me Hippie. He never called me Hank. It's right. Hippie. He said, hey, Hip, I need a favor. I said, what you need, Randy? He said, I need you to come down here and help me get some business. I have no business. I've got 5 or 6 clientele that's pretty reliable, but most of the month I don't have guide parties, and I need help. And so I called my producer, and we had all of our shows shot. And I said, can we take one of the shows out of our rotation? And if I go down there, can we shoot a show and put it on the air pretty quick? And my producer said, we can do whatever you say to do. You're the boss. And I said, well, I like that. So I went down, and Randy and I had not spoke for 4 years. And when I went down, it was one of the greatest feelings I ever had. I mean, we hugged, we embraced, and we put everything behind us. I mean, we put it all behind us, and we cut up, and we laughed, and we had fun. And I hooked the catfish. It probably weighed 55 pounds. And I said, come here. He said, what? I said, come here, take the rod a minute. Take the rod. He took the rod, and I sat down over there and popped me out a bottle of water. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I came down here to have fun. I ain't wrestling that big thing. So he caught that big fish, and we laughed about that. And we had so much fun. But make a long story short, that show aired. We got that thing edited and got it on the air within 2 weeks. And when it aired on a Sunday afternoon. I figured he'd call me because it was a great show, or at least I thought it was. He didn't call. Monday, he didn't call. Tuesday, he didn't call. Wednesday, he didn't call. Thursday afternoon, he called me in tears. I said, what's wrong? He said, I just now got off the phone. He said, I've been on the phone ever since that show. He said, I've booked my whole year. He said, I am booked solid. And he was weeping. And I thought, how awesome is that? How awesome is friendship? And I was so glad that my producer was able to help me get that show on the air. But I was so glad that Randy reached out to me. And of course, Randy passed away. I was a pallbearer at his funeral, and still hurts today. I don't know where Randy is. I talk to him about Jesus a lot, and I don't know. I just don't know. He never made a commitment to me, so I don't really know. But I am so grateful for the time we had together, and I'm so glad that I was able to patch up that hurt feelings and that friendship before he ever passed away. He and I were on wonderful terms when he passed away.
That's awesome.
There's nothing better than forgiveness. There's nothing, and that's what you and I we speak at a lot of game banquets and a lot of men's events and things like that. And really, that's what Jesus is offering all of us. He's offering us forgiveness, a chance to start over. And when you start over, and it works in every aspect of life. When you start over with a friend you've had a falling out with, when you start over with anything like that, and you offer forgiveness and you receive forgiveness, there's nothing greater than that. There's no better feeling. There's no better, everybody that comes to Christ knows the moment when they come to Christ and they realize everything you've ever done, everything you ever will do is forgiven. And it's that same kind of manifestation when we forgive one another. Jesus says that, not only, how many times should you forgive? 70 times, 70 times 7. We're to forgive one another. There's nothing greater than that. And there's nothing greater than when you have a falling out with somebody and you come back and just say, hey, listen, I'm sorry, and man, I love you, and that's a beautiful thing. And I know, and let me tell you about Randy. You never know. We make a big deal, and we should, about people, praying to receive Christ and trusting Christ, and that's what you have to do. But there was a thief on a cross, and that thief didn't have time to be baptized. He didn't have time to make a public profession. All he said was one simple sentence: Jesus, remember me when you come to your kingdom. And you never know when Randy might have said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And that's it just takes a single calling out to God, for Christ to save us. And that's my prayer, for that. It's always hard, but man, that's a beautiful story. That was good. I appreciate you sharing that with me. I've heard about Randy Horn my whole life. I mean, I'd be in the sportsman's corner that Joe Avens had up there. And that's where I spent most of my childhood, listening to Joe Avens and Randy Horn and Doug Oden and all those guys tell fishing stories my whole life. And it's wonderful when you hear, stories like that. I appreciate you sharing that.
That was the glory days of Santee, but I like exactly what you said. I had a guy that he really, really, really did me wrong. And I could not get past it, man. And so I was telling my pastor one day, I said, man, he did this and he did that and he did this. And he said, big deal, big deal. Look what you did and look what you've been forgiven for. You can't worry about that. You got to move on, man. It doesn't matter what the degree of violation is. I don't know who said this. They credited Mandela. I don't know if he's the one that said it or not, but he said to hold a grudge is like drinking poison, expecting the person you're holding the grudge against to die. You're the one drinking the poison. So
that's right.
I think that's pretty accurate.
It is. That's golden right there, because that's exactly what it does. Whenever we harbor unforgiveness, it never hurts the other person. It always hurts us. It always just eats us alive. And Jesus knew that, and he knew that, better than anybody. And when we forgive, it's, it's like a burden is lifted. And, that's good stuff.
So Sarah Beth, you're going to have to forgive all these people that write these ugly emails.
Oh, I do. I don't ever really respond.
Yeah.
But it was one the other day that I had to. Somebody was calling him a sellout and a corporate hack for just promoting a company that he's supported for years. I'm like, you guys don't know what goes on behind the scenes and what it's really like. He's the type of person that if he doesn't like a product, it doesn't matter how much money you offer him. He's not going to sell it to you because he doesn't believe in that. He won't mislead his fans in that sense. And that to me is showing his character. He's very genuine. And that's rare, I feel like, because most people, you hand them a paycheck, they said, I'll say whatever you want me to say. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong.
That's a lot in our industry.
Yeah.
Our industry is filled with that. And so that's what I always tell people. Guys ask me, they say, what? I'd like to ask this pro, what he would use in this deal. And I just say, listen, a lot of them are going to tell you, you can just look on the jersey and that's what they're going to tell you the best. If you're sponsored by Yumdinger, the Yumdinger's the best. If you're sponsored by Cinco, the Cinco's the best. But that's right.
Right.
And so, but I've struggled with that too. I struggle with not responding to people. Right. I have to bite my tongue, and I'll tell you this story. My wife unfollowed me on Facebook one time, and I went to her and I said, Pam, you're not following me on Facebook. She said, I just cannot stand when you answer people and stuff like that. So I just, my wife unfriended me on Facebook. That's
so
bad.
funny.
That was a hard lesson to learn.
No, that's so
I can
funny.
relate to you.
Yeah, my fiance is the same way. He's always in somebody's Facebook comments saying something. He's so, I guess, more of a dominant person. So whenever he sees something that isn't right, he's going to speak out on it. And I mean, his phone's constantly dinging. I'm like, great, whose comments are you in now? So I completely understand that.
That's exactly right. And Hank will tell you, the alpha male syndrome in professional bass fishing, there's a high percentage of alpha males. Every one of them think they're right, and every one of them think you need to do it that way, stuff like that. And a lot of men are like that. They just think, I can say whatever I want to say. I'm the one that's right. So it's hard sometimes.
Oh yeah.
We had a controversial one time, and Forrest Wood was my hero. Forrest, I miss him so much. Forrest Wood is a pioneer, and he just was a great ambassador to the sport, but he was a great ambassador to me and a great mentor. And this guy had done something that I felt like was a violation, and I felt like I needed to confront him. Oh. So I talked to Forrest. I said, Forrest, what do you think? He said, well, Hank, let me tell you. You wrestle with a pig, you both get muddy, and the pig loves it. I thought, okay. That's good. Enough said. I'm going to leave that alone.
Phrase. Right there. That's exactly right. You don't ever want to get into that contest with that one. So that's good sound advice right there. That really is. So
yeah, Forrest had a lot of good advice. I tell you, I miss him so much.
I tell you, every time I was ever around that guy, he was just you can just drink in the wisdom, and so he had a lot of good wisdom.
He used to my favorite saying from Forrest. He had so many. My favorite one was about bass fishing. All these kids that they want a sponsorship. They want you to give them a boat. They want you to pay their way. And Forrest, they said, well, should I even be dreaming about bass fishing? So Forrest said, it's no use to dream if you're not going to work. But then it's no use to work if you're not going to dream. So they go hand in hand. If you want to be a professional bass fisherman and you're dreaming that's your life, then you got to work at it. Nobody can give it to you. You got to earn it.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. One of the things that I point out to a lot of people ask me, I'm in a weird position because I'm going as a bass chaplain. A lot of times I'll speak and people will talk to me, like I'm a professional fisherman sometime. And I always tell them, look, there's a reason I'm the chaplain, not on the tour. Okay. I'm great at talking about bass fishing, but I'm not very good at, actually doing it. But one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is how much of a gift bass fishing actually is. Like you said about Randy Horn, there's some guys that just have been given the gift. And, I can practice my golf swing all I want to, and I'm never going to hit it like Phil Mickelson. There's no way to ever do that, no matter how much I try. And I'm never going to throw a spinnerbait like Hank Parker or Kevin Van Dam. I'm just, no matter how much I do it, because it's a gift. And so what do you think about that theory? I think, I've been with enough guys where I know the first time I went with Andy Montgomery, he skipped a buzzbait underneath a dock at Ross Burnett, and I felt like a child.
Yeah.
I said, how did you do that? I mean, how in the world? I mean, it's just a gift. That's all I can chalk it up to.
Yeah, he's taught me how to do that, by the way. I used to roll cast a little pistol grip 5.5 foot casting rod and throw that spinnerbait, and I'd roll cast it. And so I went with Andy a couple months ago, and we were talking about his rod and this shallow spool reel on how it helps you to be able to be effective at skipping. And
I got it right here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Man.
That's it. Right. I went and bought it after I watched your episode. I went and bought it.
All right, Pro SP. That's it. You got it.
That's right. Pro SP right there. Pro SP. I got it right there.
That's it. It's amazing. It's amazing. But he showed me. He said, "Hey, I shouldn't be teaching you. You taught me. It's that same opening the doorknob that you talked about with that little pistol grip handle. It's the same technique. It's rolling that wrist and skipping." And I was trying to reach out and hang out over the boat and get low to the water. He said, no, put this thing up here in your chest, just like you used to roll cast that pistol grip rod to throw that spinnerbait. Hold it up here. And he'd make it so effortless. And I watched him, and now I can't skip as good as he can, but it's amazing what that one trip with him and putting that together, it's that little roll cast. You don't have to get low to the water. You don't have to force it. It's a smooth delivery, and now I can skip. So I'm all excited about that.
Oh, yeah.
Man, I tell you, I've watched him so many times skip things into places that there's no way I could do it. I'm thinking that. That's why I just say, God, you've gifted him to do this, and you've gifted me to do whatever, but it's not that.
Me too. I've got the gift of catching a log on the bottom. I snag on everything. If there is a limb or a log in that lake, I'm catching it.
Limb brim.
Yep. There you go.
That's exactly right. I just chalk it up. There's no way I'm ever shoot a basketball like Steph Curry, and I'm not ever going to pitch a jig like Andy Montgomery. But I just have to do I have to stay in my lane.
Yeah,
right.
Stay in your lane. People ask me, and of course it's my opinion from what I've seen and what I've observed. Larry Nixon has so much of that Randy Horn natural ability to read a lake and put it all together. And I don't think Clun had any of that. Look how accomplished Ricky Clun is, but Clun's work ethic. Clun worked and refined and became one of the greatest fishermen ever. And I think it's funny how people can achieve their dream even though they may not have that full gift of reading the water like Nixon. Nixon's an amazing guy.
Right. Yeah.
He beat me so many times out of Angler of the Year. Larry's just awesome natural ability. And of course, he works at that as well. But Clun didn't seem to me, at least, to have any of that natural ability. He earned everything he got. He worked at it and perfected it. And so there's all sorts of different levels of guys out there that are successful. Right. And it's really fun to watch that.
nobody beats Clint to the water first. He's always the first angler on the water. And, his work ethic was outstanding. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, he's going to be there first and being there, getting acclimated and doing his thing. And so, I know one time old David Williams, used to try to get under Rick Clunn's skin by getting there first, and so they were having kind of a race to see who could get there the earliest all the time. And so it was fun watching them, battle it out, who's going to get to the ramp first. But you're right. He's an amazing fisherman.
Well, we're running out of time, and you know how that goes. But we want to close out with the challenge on letting you give me the formulation how you're going to get this whole thing fixed up and get all this fussing and fighting over with and get everybody back at on the same level ground where it was like it used to be, where it's kind of a family reunion when we all get together.
Man, I tell you what, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pray every single day. And one of the things I do is I lift up every single Elite Series angler every Wednesday. We pray and call out their names. We hand all the new guys a Bible and we invite them in every turn. But one of my goals, and Hank, I don't know how much longer I'm going to do be the chaplain for the Elite Series, but one of my goals is to simply share Jesus with everybody on the tour this year. I want to just say, hey, listen, if I didn't care about you, I wouldn't say a thing in the world about you. I wouldn't care about this at all. But, if you really, about almost 3 years ago, my wife passed away. And I held her hand while she died. And I'll tell you this, at that moment, it didn't matter how many vacations we had gone on. It didn't matter how much money we had in the bank or how many places I preached or whatever. The only thing that mattered in that moment was I knew when she took her last breath, her next breath was in the presence of Jesus.
Woo.
And it wasn't because she was a good person. She was a good person, but it's because at some time in her life, she put her faith and her trust in Jesus as her Lord and Savior. And so that's my goal, is that Jesus brings everything together. He brings peace in our lives, and he brings us together as brothers and sisters in Christ. And so that's going to be the message this year, to try to make sure every single Elite Series angler and everybody around that tour knows that you need to reach out to Christ for your life, and that will be the most important decision that you'll ever make. So that's my plan. So,
that's the answer.
That's a good plan.
That is the answer for camaraderie. That's the answer for respect, and I deeply admire that. And if I had to say one thing to summarize Chris Wells, it's you're real. You're the real deal. You live it, you walk it, you talk it, and you're the most sincere guy. The Bass family is so blessed to have you as their chaplain, and we were very blessed to have you spend a little time with us on this podcast. I love you, my brother, and I sure appreciate who you are and what you do. You mean the world to me, and you're a great ambassador for my Lord, and I appreciate it.
Cool. I mean, you've been my hero since I was a kid. I love you, man, and I appreciate the opportunity. I'm just so honored to be here, and I appreciate the time we get to spend together.
Well, I'm going to have you back next year when everything is smooth and all the controversies over with, and we say, you fixed it, brother. You prayed it through.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
That would be a miracle.
Yeah. Well, he's in the miracle business, brother. We know how to get a hold of him, and I know you do.
Right.
That's awesome. Thank you for being with me, my buddy. Yes, sir. Tell him bye, sir.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right. We'll say goodbye to everybody. Thank you, Chris.
All right. See you all next week.
Thank you, brother.
Yes, sir. All right. Next week, we'll be back on the water. So back off the water. Off the water. I never get that right. So next week, we'll be back with more Off the Water. Thanks for being with us. God bless you. I'm Hank Parker. See you next time.